the International Symposium on Autoethnography and Narrative, 2025. Echoes of Experience, Marjorie Kanter. I begin my presentation with Flavor, a short, hybrid, creative poem-like piece of mine based on a real-life experience, captured as it was without frills, i.e., no context. The campera, meaning the farm lady, the foreigner, y el novio, meaning the boyfriend. I was with him when she asked me if I had the same moon where I was from. I said yes, and she said, how romantic. It was 1969. I was traveling third-class train going south in Spain with my Spanish partner. I became a writer while living outside my first culture. My hybrid work is focused on, comes out of, real-life experience. I start out capturing a sequence of events where I am either a mere observer, even an unknown anonymous one, or a participant plus observer. Then I play with it, putting in pieces or parts, and leaving some out, but sticking to the facts. Sometimes later, there is a creative twist that sneaks in to offset the reality. Once in a while, there is a purely invented text, yet it does express in some way something of my real life experience. The people in all these interacts are usually unnamed and anonymous, except for myself, who I represent through the use of I. I can say I've been a writer for the past 20 years, but there are bits in my memory and documents that perhaps foreshadow what was to come. I conserve a photograph of myself in black and white from our family albums. I was a baby then, so it was in 1943 or early 1944 that the picture was taken. As a preschooler, I wrote on that photograph in mirrored image my name, Margie, marking my identity, taking possession. It was me and not my brother Steve or my sister Joni. It was me. When I was about 12, in the 7th grade, I wrote a story called Pink Toe Shoes and Tights to Match. It was about a little girl who wanted to be a graceful ballerina, but she thought she was clumsy. Then one day, suddenly things changed, and she was a beautiful, graceful dancer. The story ends with this little unnamed girl waking up from a deep sleep dream and discovering that she still is that clumsy girl. I took ballet for 10 years, had a marvelous teacher, Annalisa van Ottingen, and loved it. I wanted to be a ballerina. I was not to become a prima donna. At the university, I studied to become a speech and language therapist and then worked for 20 years in this field. First in direct services, and then as a teacher, trainer, and administrator. Along the way, I started learning Spanish and started providing these services to and about children from other languages and cultures who were living within the USA. I wrote case studies and used composite case studies in the training sessions that I ran and delivered. As a direct service provider, I found that I was successful with children with whom others had failed. One of the children I worked with, B, a 5-year-old, had already received 3 years of speech therapy when I met him and was already named over and over a failure in life at 2, at 3, and at 4 years of age. He'd made no progress, and he was blamed for it. At 5, his only observable means of communication was to throw himself on the ground in a temper tantrum. He was labeled as retarded, brain damaged, hearing impaired, or deaf, living with an alcoholic grandfather and a failure, someone unable to be helped. He'd been taught oral language during those 3 years. No one who'd serviced him said, I failed B. It was all his responsibility. Like them, I'd also been taught that one should not use sign language, that the deaf should learn to read lips and use oral speech. It didn't make sense to me, so I started a course in sign language and using pictures, actions, gestures, games, behavior modification, and sign language B quickly settled down and began to learn. At the end of the year, on a nonverbal IQ test, he tested out with normal intelligence and got into the school for the deaf. In 1986, I moved to Spain, and that is where my creative writing began to take shape and hold. For 8 years, I lived in Tarifa, a small town at the southernmost point of Europe, where you could look across the Straits of Gibraltar, just 9 miles away, and see another continent, and specifically Tangier, Morocco. At the time, I spoke some Spanish, but not very well. I needed someone to talk to in English, but there weren't many speakers of English there at the time. So that person was me, and writing was my tool. I began keeping journals, often in scribbles, to help me both take distance from and get inside my experiences. I had a need to understand myself, my context, others around me, and our relationships and interactions. 8 years later, I moved to Madrid, carried my journals with me, and began rereading them. First, I discovered they had, over the 8 years, largely turned from English to Spanish, a surprise. Then I saw scenes in them and phrases that jumped out at me, and I felt a need to put them on separate pages. From there, I began working with those phrases until I came up with or found that I had reached a point of feeling that I had a finalized text. I joined a writer's group, and then another, and then started still another one. Here's a creative piece from a captured event set in Tarifa when I was still going there regularly, but now housed in Madrid. The title: People, Fish, Names, and Games. We are out to eat at this a seaside chiringuito, a little restaurant on the beach. There are 4 of us, 3 Spaniards and me. We are in Spain. The menu is in Spanish. A large blackboard on the wall lists the catch of the day. Reading the menu, I come to one word I don't know, the name for a particular kind of fish. I've never heard of it before. I turn to the lady on my left, point to the unknown word, and ask her in Spanish, "What kind of fish is that?" She turns to the Spanish guy on her left, her son, points to the word and asks him, "What kind of fish is that?" He turns to the Spanish gentleman on his left, his father, points to the word and asks him, "What kind of fish is that?" The father says, "No lo sé." That brings it full circle back to me. I pass on my turn. That brings it back to her. She takes charge, takes control, calls to the waitress, and then, all the while pointing at me, and then to the word on the menu, and then back to me again, she says, "She's American and doesn't know what that is. What is it?" The waitress doesn't know either. In 2004, I published my first book of short literary pieces and also had a piece, The Skirt, published in a literary journal, the Barcelona Review. From the moment of the publication of my first book, I Displace the Air as I Walk, I began offering a walking tour, taking people around the old town of Madrid, where I have lived now for 30 years. On the tour, we stopped to read my pieces in situ at the spot where the incident in the text first happened. I also began offering creative writing workshops. This is one piece first appearing in my book and then recycled for the walking tour. Backdrops. That's the title. Backdrops. It was pouring rain when I overheard him announce to his friend that he was heading outdoors to make a phone call. I happened to look at my watch and noticed it was exactly 14:30. The waiter called to him and said, "You don't have to go outside. We have coverage." He went out anyway. A few minutes later, he came back in, dripping wet. I overheard him tell his colleague, "I had an appointment at 1400. I told them I was caught in a traffic jam." In 2007-2008, I was selected for a year-long site-specific word installation project in communication in Lleida, Spain at the Caixa Foundation, and again recycled my writing for this, posting in vinyl letters under a seat in the auditorium, on a wall in an elevator, and on the men's bathroom on a mirror, and in the women's on a mirror, amongst other texts. It was really a lot of fun, that project. I have other projects, including a 100-day one for the London Word Festival. It consists of one tweet per day, each containing a 144-character text focused on the theme of impoliteness. Other word projects I have developed include a wall of plastic bags the size of a postcard containing each one of my texts on a card, along with a found object to go with the text. You can see some of these behind me. Other projects and workshops focused on a theme of waiting, another on silence, another on mirror and mirroring. In both my own creative work and in preparing workshops, I have in the back of my mind 3 maxims: attention and notice, accurate recording, and playfulness. And during the workshops, we cycle through many very short, they might be 2-minute exercises, and then those are shared in short group interventions after they've individually been written. And we cycle through those short activities using these 3 maxims. I end my presentation with this creative piece written in Spain. It integrates my real-life literal self in Cincinnati, Ohio as a 25-year-old with an invented part that comes out of my Spanish experienced self some 40 or 50 years later. The canned box. One day, this 5-year-old, at the moment when it was full of cowboys and Indians shooting at each other, asked me to please open up the TV, to go and get the can opener so we could play with the people locked up inside there. He was more than disappointed when they shot us dead. Thank you. I look forward to our dialogue.